You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. As always, I am your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson, coming to you out of beautiful, hot, peaceful, sweet, fun barbecue capital of the world, Lockhart, Texas. And I think this pairing today, myself and my guest, is one that should have happened a long time ago. We finally made it happen. Shayne Swenson, iconographer extraordinaire, is on the show. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with his work. If you're not, you're about to be blown away because, well, for one, when you see this interview, he's sitting like 20 feet high up in the air on a piece of scaffolding with some of his work, basically work in progress behind him on the wall. He's at a church, basically painting the entire inside of the church with beautiful iconography. This is a two-part episode. Part one, we dive deep into his past, his journey. We obviously get into iconography. He's a tattoo artist. Ooh, is that bad within Orthodoxy to get tattoos or to give tattoos? We get deep into that subject matter. Part two, we get even deeper into iconography itself. And we mentioned this during the episode. I should tell you guys, he can do basically an entire presentation on the history of iconography, the different styles, the geographical origins of certain styles of iconography, what it means within our Orthodox faith, different styles. And he can do a lot of that with visual representation and explanation. So we are going to do that on a special live stream that he and I are still trying to schedule. So I think you'll get bits and pieces of that type of thing throughout both episodes. But just so you know, he will do a deep dive into specifically just Orthodox iconography, where it came from, the various regions of it throughout the world where some of it arose from, and the periods in history, etc. We are going to do a live stream where he gets into all of that with, like I said, the visual representations. Let's see, what else can I tell you? I think I should just tell you that he is an Orthodox Christian iconographer. His work can be found in many churches and monasteries all over the world, and of course, in home icon corners all over the world as well. And thank goodness, thank the Lord, thank God, he is with us finally today, my friend, joining us from high up, some scaffolding there in a parish. Shayne Swenson, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Good. It's nice to be here. I watch your podcast all the time, and it's cool to be chatting with you.
Yeah, it's cool to have you. I was thinking, it seems like it should have already happened. I was trying to run down the similarities. You're former Protestant, yes?
Mm-hmm. Sort of, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a connection there, sure.
Former atheist, as am I. Obviously, the ink and tattooed culture, subculture, music and whatnot. But outside of that, what I'm not is that you're an awesome artist. And probably when I talk to people about you, it's like, oh, he's the best. He's the best. I know you probably don't want to hear that or you don't think that, but a lot of people do. And people were excited some of my close friends, when I said that I was going to have you on here. I'll let you give an intro for yourself, and then we'll jump into, I have all kinds of questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not, obviously, most people's self-awareness don't like to sit and talk about themselves too much, but I'll give a brief synopsis of my background and, why I'm sitting up here 25 feet in the air with these paintings of God. Like I said, my name is Shayne Swenson, and I spent 20 plus years as a professional tattoo artist. I converted to Orthodoxy probably about 13 years ago, 12, maybe 13 years ago, or at least the ball started rolling. I was intellectually convinced, it takes a while before you're 100% of the church, but most people, when you reach a sort of a tipping point where it's like you're Orthodox. And then from there, I immediately jumped into iconography. Almost immediately jumped into it, and it came quickly because of my background as a tattooer. I already had that art foundation. I've also done other. I guess I should say I've been a professional artist in some degree. For 25 years or so. I've been the quasi art director at a larger Orthodox media outfit who I won't name, but
okay.
Not for any reason. There's no bad blood. I just, and then, I mean, I've done illustration, logo, all the stuff that artists do, but also primarily I've been a tattoo artist. I'm still a tattoo artist, for my, the first few years I was Orthodox, I tried to distance myself from it.
Yeah.
And, I tried to distance myself from it just because I was a little, not conflicted, but I just didn't know how to deal with that. A lot of what you hear about tattooing from people who are Orthodox, unless you're tattooed a lot or you're a tattoo artist, it's usually nonsense. What they say, like they just don't really know what they're talking about. It's caricature or it's just ridiculous. So actually, one of the people who sort of shook me into not being that way was actually Father Turbo. We're not like buddies or close. We don't ever talk, but I remember it was before he was a priest, and I posted something stupid about tattooing because you'll read Father Seraphim Rose. This has been going on for like over 20, 30 years with Father Seraphim Rose. Oh, this isn't new. People that are discovering him now and like freaking out. There's a reason people freak out in a good way, but like you sort of have that experience where it's so intense and you just want to like beat people over the head with it.
Oh, yes.
Well, I went through that too. And so I thought, well, I need to quit everything and you have to grow a beard and do all the meme stuff. And I forget what I wrote or what I said, but I do remember Father Turbo sending me a message that was pretty gnarly. Not like, it was kind of mean. I talked to him years later and he was like, hey, sorry, I was a jerk about that. But he was right. I mean, he's like, what are you doing? This is stupid. This isn't Orthodoxy. He had been Orthodox several years before I converted. And
by that, he meant
when I read that,
you ditching all the tattoo stuff's not Orthodox.
Yeah. And just being like, oh, that's so bad. And, oh, you shouldn't do that. And and I think it was in conjunction. I was getting some tattoos. I mean, not that I have the nicest tattoos in the world. Generally speaking, tattooers that have been tattooing longer than a lot of these kids that have been doing it for 2 or 3 years, who get their face tattooed like Post Malone now.
Right.
That's like the first place they get tattooed.
Yeah.
But a lot of the, if you're a tattooer and I'm considered an old guy now, you have bad tattoos. Like not all of them, but a lot of your tattoos are terrible. I have some decent tattoos, but I have a lot of terrible tattoos. And so I was getting laser removal done at the time. Kind of, I don't know if I want to get it covered or if I just want to get rid of it. There were some, I was in the St. Stephen's course. There was some other, I don't want to get into that, but there were some reasons I was getting it removed. And it was in conjunction, I think, with posting something like that. And Father Turbo, I think he interpreted me getting tattoo removal with what I was saying about it, And I was still kind of working through that stuff. I actually met Abatrifon before I was even Orthodox through a friend of mine who I knew online who wrote for Death of the World years and years ago. And I connected with him because I live in Washington. He invited me over to Seattle and I met Abatrifon and we hit it off, became instant friends. And so he's always been there ever since even I was an inquirer. Abatrifon has always sort of been.
And he's your spiritual father, just for those people listening that don't know that.
Right. And a spiritual father, it sounds, it's someone who quite literally is a spiritual father who fills that role of a spiritual advisor or someone, an elder in the non-clairvoyant sense, like an elder, just someone who's been in the faith a long time, a priest, could be a parish priest, it could be a monk or whatever, providentially, whoever God brings into your life, who is just there to help you as a guide. And it just so happens he's my confessor as well, and which is what you want usually. And so anyway, and he was very, if you know any, people know Abatrifon online. We're kind of all over the place right at the gate. So I'm sorry. I'm like, oh yeah, and then there's this.
Yeah.
But anyway, it all relates. I'll tie a bow on it here in a second. But so Abatrifon was the one who told me, it was before I started to explore iconography seriously as sort of a vocation, as the Catholics call it, a vocation, a job and service of the church. Before I really started exploring it seriously, I was talking to Abatrifon about tattooing, and he was like, well, it's probably long-term not something that is going to benefit your soul to be continued, for you to continue doing, but you have a family, and it's definitely not what these people are saying it is. Like, people think that there was some like Roman Catholic exorcist, like some weirdo who like they make memes about. No offense to Catholics, I like Catholics, but this guy is like kind of a loon bag or whatever. And he was like, anyone who tattoos is injecting demonic, just nonsense, like jack chick tier stupidity.
Yeah.
And anyway, the Abbot was like, this is not obviously what it is. So let's see where God takes you with this. And so I already had that seed planted, and then I started getting laser removal done, just because I did these tattoos and didn't really know where I wanted to go with that. And by the way, laser removal is
way worse,
heinous, and it's one of the worst things. Like, the style of tattooing that I do, or did, I guess, was I did large scale black and gray realism, and you can't really cover things up very well because of the nature of the ink and blah, blah, blah. So I would refer people to get laser removal done, and I could always like downplay it, like, oh, it's real quick, it's not that bad. But you probably know it's like being like whipped with a soldering iron or something. Like, it's electrical, like it's really bad. So anyway, I was getting this done, and I think I was posting something online about how painful it was and why I was doing it, and considering it, why I got tattooed, and thinking that it's wrong to get tattooed. Literally just working through this stuff. And I was probably being a jerk about it because that's just my nature. My father's Turbo sent me a DM, and I don't think we were like friends on I think it was Facebook, Boomer Book or something. Mm-hmm. And he sent me a message. He was like, he basically was like, you're being an idiot. Like, this is not, you shouldn't be going about it this way. And like I said before, he was rough about it, but I'm a big boy. I can deal with it. Years later, I think he was hanging out with Abbot Trifon, actually, because Abbot Trifon does this all the time. He'll be with somebody and be like, you should call Shayne. And it's like some person I've never talked to. And I'll be like, hello? And it's like, hi, I'm so-and-so. I don't know you, but let's talk for an hour. So
yes,
Abbot Trifon loves to do, I love him, but he knows how antisocial stuff I am. And so he likes to, like a dad would, put you in embarrassing situations and laugh about it. But at the end of the day, it's actually probably good that he did that, so you're not such a weirdo socially. But anyway, so I got a call, and it was Father Turbo. He wasn't a priest. Maybe he was a priest at the time. I don't know. I'm sure he remembers all this. You can ask him. He wasn't a priest at the time, or maybe he was. I think he was, and just been ordained or something. And he was like, hey, man, sorry about that. I didn't mean to come at you that way or whatever. It was a little weird because I didn't know the guy, but I thought it was really cool. I was like, yeah, no problem. Thanks. All's forgiven. I didn't hold a grudge or anything. So he was the one that he really did, like, he made me go, oh, maybe he's right. Maybe this is stupid to be one of those people.
Yes.
And from that point on, I had way less of like a moral issue with tattooing. And then the more I saw of what people were saying, especially Orthodox people, over the years, I've had clergy, even just like nut job clergy, literally telling people, Shayne Swenson's iconography is an abomination because of his tattooing, and it's abomination before God, and you shouldn't have it in your house. Like, isn't there like, wasn't that Marcion? I don't know. There's some like heresy about priests.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I sound like an idiot. Like, yeah, there's some heresy, but you get what I'm saying. People that know will draw out what I'm trying to say here. So I've heard it all. And my goal over the years has been to merge out of tattooing into iconography as my vocation, as the way I provide for my family. But it's not like I can just flip a switch and be like, you can't force that. God has to provide those opportunities. And he has. I mean, I prayed about it, and God has. I could tell you stories. Things have just, and it's not because I'm special. There's a lot of other people where God does that in their life on whatever path they're on or whatever they're called to do.
Yep.
We all have that synchronicity or whatever you want to call it, and answered prayer in very, very small, subtle ways, but ways.
Yep.
Sometimes
not subtle, but yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes oil pours out of an icon.
Mm-hmm.
You can't explain it, but other times you meet people and it's like, what? How do you know? And you've had those. Everyone has had those experiences to some degree or another. So, anyway, yeah, I still consider myself a tattoo artist. I like tattooer. I think tattoo artist sounds really, really pretentious. I don't know. I've always been
fair.
like tattoo art. I mean, I don't think people that say that are pretentious, but personally, like, I just feel stupid saying I'm a tattoo artist. You know, like,
right. Like
I just feel weird saying that. So if people are like tattooer, like, if you've not heard that, that's just a term for tattoo artist from maybe someone who's a little insecure about seeming like an idiot, which is me. But anyway,
I hope that you don't stop tattooing before you tattoo me. That's what I'll say on record in public here.
I don't think I'll ever stop tattooing. The place I work at now is like the owner of the place. He's one of my best friends. I can just kind of come and go. That's why I don't know. That's why I don't like just have my own private studio. I have the clientele for it, but the guy that I've worked at this place for over a decade, and he's just, you know, other tattooers that watch this will know, like, if you find a place where you connect with the owner and the other people, you better stay there, because the tattoo industry can be a revolving door.
Yes, a lot of flakes, as you know.
A lot of flakes. It does attract now, so not so much. I think the industry's obviously changed, but when I got into it, it was like there's still some characters, but it attracted people who couldn't hold a real job, basically.
Yes.
So anyway, but yeah, I don't have the weird moral issue with tattooing, because most people who attack it, and I'm not mad at them, I don't like try and correct them. I just sort of smile and nod. I've learned being Orthodox long enough now, when people are zealous about something, especially online, like, nobody says anything to my face. Nobody ever has. I've never had somebody come up to me and be like, you're a tattooer. I've never had that happen. It's always online. I'll get emails. I used to get tons of messages on Instagram from weirdos. Like, you're in the public sphere.
Yes.
And people are just insufferable. And so you after a while, you're like, it's not worth time. Well, and especially the background you come from, it's with the political sphere is like 10 times worse than me painting pictures of Jesus that some like nut job in Romania freaks out about. You know what I mean? So no offense, Romania. I love Romania, but
yes, yeah. I just ignore all that kind of stuff anyway. And I, like you said, smile and nod. There was some sort of ortho group on Facebook that I guess I'm in, because I see the feed sometime. And it's a lot of inquiries by young people. Hey, it was are tattoos sinful, or are tattoos evil, or I don't know, something like that. And all these, and I was just like, okay, skip on to the next.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's honestly, it's like, and I respect their opinions. Like, you can totally, I could probably fill a notebook with the amount of emails people have sent me, rightly so, I guess, asking me for my opinion or guidance on whether or not they should get a tattoo as an Orthodox Christian.
You say, ask your priest.
And I always I always go, hey, whoa. And I usually say this before any podcast I go on. I am not an academic. I'm not a priest. I'm not a hieromonk. I'm not a guru. I'm not a YouTube e-celeb. I am but a lowbrow painter. I'm just a guy, just like everybody else. I'm a tattoo artist. So that's even more like...
You're a tattooer.
That's right.
Yes.
See, you remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people send me messages like that, I will tell them, I understand. I can't give you advice on that. And people usually walk away kind of bummed, because I think they want me to be like, yeah, you should do this, or no, I've repented of that, or they want to hear something like that. But I don't want the responsibility. What if they? I don't know. And then people ask me, I want someone to tattoo this on me because it's Orthodox, or an icon or something, and it's like, that's a whole other topic. I don't tattoo iconography.
Okay.
I have.
What about just the cross, like that's one on your neck?
Yeah. I mean, I'll do stuff like that. But if someone's like, I want an icon of Saint Nicholas.
Okay, got it.
I pass the buck, because I'm not, number one, this is what I do for a living. And it's already a scandal enough with some people that I'm a tattoo artist, or that I was a tattoo artist. There's already people who are weird about it. So I don't want to, and this was at the advice of Father Trifon, by the way, when we talked about it. I don't want to do anything my philosophy, I guess, is I want to serve everyone in the church across jurisdiction, ideology, even political alignment. I've done work for the Greeks. I'll just
I knew
leave it at
that's the
that.
word you were going to say. Sure.
Well, I mean, I've done works, but I'm not like, I'm just saying, like, I've
Yes,
done
I knew
work
it. I know
on
what you
behalf of Archbishop Ildefonso personally. I'm not like specialist. I have a buddy who knows him and asked me to do something. That's all. He didn't like find me like Shayne Swenson is. I just have a friend that knows him. So but anyway, I didn't turn it down because of his political
Fair. Yeah,
awareness or his liberalism. You know, he's still a prince of the church. He's still a bishop, and so I did that, and I served the Greeks and the Russians, and I just like to paint icons, man. And so if someone doesn't agree with me on some political issue, and they're not asking me to do something like paint a bunch of, like, I don't know, female deacons, or something weird and truly non-canonical, I'm not going to do that. But I don't take people, and my philosophy comes from the fact that if a priest, I'm not a priest, but the priest doesn't have that opportunity to turn someone away because he doesn't like their politics.
Sure.
And I've decided, not that my job is like sacramental or ordained by the priest or by the church. It's not, but I still feel like there's a responsibility to serve everyone, because at the end of the day, when I leave here, pack up, and the iconography's on the wall for however long this church, God ordains this church to stand, I want to disappear. I want to just disappear after my time on this earth and my period of existence and painting is over. I want to just recede, and all that's left is the iconography, so that people can connect with God and not worry about Shayne's right-wing politics or something.
Sure.
So,
yes, I do.
Anyway, so
once a month, my supporters of this show and myself and a special guest have a Zoom meeting. It's not recorded. It's not posted. It's just private. It's between you guys, the guest, and myself. I do this because it means a lot for you guys who support me by showing me that this show means a lot to you. I love talking with you. I look at it as like a benefit for people that support the show, but it's really a benefit for me. I get to know you guys and have an off-the-record discussion with our guest, and sometimes topics you don't want to necessarily have all the ins and outs discussed online, if you know what I mean. So to be in this group, please go to patreon.com/counterflow and donate $5 or more per month. And it gets you in this club. We do it once a month. It's a great time. It's great people. They're all smarter than me. So that's an upgrade from what you're used to. I can tell you that. The guests are always guests that people want to hear from. A lot of you guys will be familiar with many of the guests. Father Turbo's done it. Father Deacon Ananias has done it. David Patrick Harry's done it. My own priest, Father Ignatius, has done it. Father Moses McPherson's done it. It's a very good time, and I think you guys would enjoy it. If you love this content, please go to patreon.com/counterflow, $5 or more per month. Thank you. I got a place to take this. So your religious background, I know there was an atheist period, as I had too, and you're drinking the yerba mates. That's one of my favorite drinks right there. I need a sponsorship.
That's a lie. It's actually...
Oh, it's the yellow Red Bull. Okay.
My wife's like, you're getting old. You should stop drinking those. And she's correct. I'm currently on the search for something that hits that dopamine center in my brain. Really? I've never tried it. Is it good?
Oh, it's great. Yeah, and it's in a yellow can like that. But they're not...
Maybe I'll try it.
They're great. How did you view... I know you also had a religious background, then atheist, similar to mine. Yeah. I came to the Orthodox Church, and I immediately was like, I love the icon stuff. Some people are like, well, that's a little weird, or what does that mean? Or is this you're worshiping a piece of wood? What were your thoughts when you first encountered iconography, considering the background that you have?
Well, when some people ask me stuff like this a lot, not a lot, but whenever when I'm talking to somebody on a podcast or in person about this very issue, and you would think that it would be, the iconography would be sort of the knockout punch, where I saw it was just had this crazy, it really wasn't though. It was a gradual, I when I saw it, I didn't have an issue with it. Let me back up, because I had come back. But it's probably easier to explain it this way. I had come into Orthodoxy from Roman Catholicism.
Correct. Right.
And I came back. I was raised nominally Catholic. I went to a Catholic school. What they say about I was raised Catholic. People say that, and then they say it's the stupidest, most like liberal nonsense ever.
Yes.
Well, I was raised sort of that way, nominally Catholic, went to Catholic school for 2 years, but I never really embraced it. When I was in high school, I had I wouldn't say I was bullied or anything, but I was, well, not a lot, sort of, but a little bit, but nothing to where I have like PTSD or something to this day. But I was always the weird kid that like, I had the Nine Inch Nails t-shirt and everyone thought was like kind of weird, but
Sure.
I was into comic books. This was the 90s. And so that was like the edgy stuff back then.
Yeah.
And but at that point we had stopped going to church, and I met this one kid in like an algebra class. And he was, I was kind of a loner. I would just go skateboard at lunch and stuff. I had a couple friends, but no real close friends. And he totally did the youth group friend thing. He was like, "Hey man,
yes.
You know what I mean?" And which is cool. I mean, he was a friend of mine. He became a friend of mine for years and years. A legitimate friend. He wasn't just like love bombing or whatever the Mormons call it, like trying to like influence you to the church. He was like, "Hey, I'm going to. We have a youth," or he didn't call it youth group, but he said, "Do you want to hang out?" And like we talked about. He had a really good sense of humor. I sort of have I guess you would say a good sense of humor, or I don't know. I have kind of a dark sense of humor, and so we had similar sense of humor, I'll say. And so we hit it off. I went to his house and hung out a few times, and then I went to their youth group. Did that for the rest of the school year. Went to a Pentecostal Bible camp, actually here in Montana. That's where I'm at. I'm in Butte, Montana, painting. In case people want to know, they're probably wondering why I didn't say that earlier. I'm up on scaffolding painting Holy Trinity Serbian Orthodox Church in Butte, Montana. That's what's going on here, in case you wonder. But anyway, I grew up in Missoula, Montana, and that's where all this went down. I went to the Bible camp, and I had a legitimate, what you would call a born-again experience, where I had an encounter with Christ. Now, I don't know, I don't try and define that. It is what it is at the age I was at, and I experienced what I experienced. Was the theology weird? Yeah, they were speaking in tongues and just, insane stuff. The community was great. The people were great. And I don't judge people individually. And I honestly, for years, I would kind of reject all that, but I don't even judge myself in that experience, because that's the moment that got me turned toward Christianity.
Yes. So I've gone into rants about Pastor John Hagee, whose church I went to. And I remember one of my guests and friends, Clark Carlton, was like, "Well, hold on. Obviously something good came out of it, because now you're here. So you can't knock someone for like, well, they taught me this bad stuff." It's like, well, you're here now. And so somehow that went through them at some point. So sorry.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I distinctly remember him saying that. I was actually listening to those podcasts. Well, I wasn't right here. I was a different part of the church, but while I was painting.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was listening. I love Clark Carlton.
Me
His
too.
book, The Faith.
Yes.
Is just brilliant. I wish she wouldn't have sort of like disappeared. I wish she would have put down her books, but I love the guy, but I don't know him, but he's just huge impact on me when that book did years ago. But anyway, exactly what he said. That's exactly where I'm at with all that stuff. At least personally in my experience. And so that's what got me pointed towards Christ legitimately, not just as an abstract concept, but as like a relational thing. And so I did that, for high school, I was sort of the Christian kid, listened to the DC talk and all the, all that stuff. And then I joined the military right out of high school.
I did not picture you as a DC talk fan.
I know. Oh, you're saying the military. But
no, well, that's
no, DC talk. DC talk, man, that was the thing in the 90s.
Yeah, it was, but I was already into oi and punk rock and stuff, so I had seen that they existed, but it was not going to ever be taken seriously by me. No offense, DC talk. It was just, and I'm about 5 years older or 4 than Shayne, so maybe that's part of it.
I had a very short, a really good friend of mine who wasn't a Christian kid. He was sort of like, I wouldn't call him a hipster, but he was like, I don't know if you might, I don't know if maybe you were this guy, but there were people, maybe this was like a uniquely 1990s thing, but there were like people who were just like thrive in any sort of, this is a really goofy term, a countercultural scene, like music or whatever in a city. I don't even know if this exists anymore because of the way that society is now, but
it doesn't. And I exactly know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? And,
Yes.
and it doesn't matter like what, if you're in New York City or if you're in Missoula, Montana, there was like a punk rock scene. And so as a kid, I think most kids in the 90s, you sort of had like different groups of friends and different lives that you lived. Like I had my church friends,
Yep.
you know, and then I had guys, my buddy who I went to shows, punk rock shows and stuff with. I wasn't super, I mean, I was into the music, but it wasn't the driving factor. I mean, a really good ska band actually that I saw a ton is from Missoula, the Skoidats. They were on Boom Ska.
Yes, I remember them.
You heard it? Oh, yes. Dude, they were like, I would go when I was like 15 and drink beer at the lead singer's house. I think he's like a dance. I think he's like he won't know who I am because everybody went there. But yeah, ska and all that stuff was going on. But my buddy, around that time in the 90s, him and I think probably the only black guy in Missoula at the time were skinheads. Like, old, like,
the real
you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, not the Nazi type, but the real actual skinhead. And that was my exposure to that. And what was that Spirit? What was that book they all
Spirit of 69.
Read? Spirit of 69. Yeah, they all had that.
I have that. I have that too. Still,
there was like a small little group of them, and I hung out with a lot of the dudes, and they introduced me to some of the music. And for like a short period of time, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna be a skinhead. And so we'd like watch We'd watch like Romper Stompers. I don't know. You know, all this stuff. And then I shaved my head and I looked like a total nerd. I don't have like the build to be a skinhead. It just didn't work out. And I had like it's just not me. And so, I jettisoned that idea for other waters. But anyway, I don't know how we got on this, but I was talking about.
It makes sense though. I like it.
It makes sense. Anyway, so after high school, I joined the military and I was stationed in Germany. And this is like 99 to like 2002. And so, the military is like, and I could legally drink because over there, the alcohol laws were totally different. And so, I didn't go to church over there. There weren't any churches really. And so, I mean, there were, but there weren't like what I was used to. There weren't like Pentecostal churches or whatever. And so I spent all my Army years just being a typical young Army degenerate. I drank a lot, did a lot of drugs, the usual thing that most people do. And sort of, I was still Christian. I was still a Christian, but I didn't go to church. And I was sort of disconnected from it. Felt guilty, but was disconnected. And then when I got out of the military, that's when I sort of spun my wheels a little bit. Met my wife shortly thereafter. I got super into DJing for like 2 years. And then that's how I met my wife, actually. Anyway, and then played in a band, played some music, and, did the stuff you do in your early 20s that a lot of people do, did all that stuff. And had fun and was able to do it, able to tour a little bit, and I was able to sort of scratch that itch, as they say, and do some of those things and accomplish some of those goals, regardless of whether or not we played on the main stage at Warped Tour, which we didn't. But I was able to sort of taste some of that, what that was like. And then I was getting tattooed, got a tattoo apprenticeship with a friend of mine. And from there, everything's history with that. My wife, girlfriend at the time, got pregnant. We started going back to church. And it was a long way of saying we started going back to church. And we ended up moving to Seattle, Washington. And if you're I don't know if you're familiar with there's a church in Seattle in the early 2000s that like blew up. And it was part of this movement called I think it was called like the emergent church or some goofy thing like that. There was like some name for the trend or whatever this new evangelical thing was. And they were the church I was involved in. And I know there's probably a bunch of people listening that will listen to this that'll know exactly the church I'm talking about, was called Mars Hill. And the pastor was Pastor Mark Driscoll.
This is real familiar to me for some reason. I guess maybe I came across it somewhere, but they're not the ones that all switched, are they?
I'm not sure. I mean,
they didn't become Orthodox. That wasn't one of those churches.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Mm-mm. Actually, I mean, several people did after the church imploded. Imagine that. A crazy popular evangelical church just implodes.
Yeah.
We've never seen that before. But my time there was actually really beneficial because I was able to dig into Christianity at sort of a deeper level for all of Mark's faults. And you can look up information about him. I won't go into it because that would take the rest of the podcast. But I really benefited from being there. He introduced everyone to, it was sort of like Reformed theology light, I would say. He introduced people to Reformed theology, Calvinism, John Calvin, the Reformers, like that part of church history, Charles Spurgeon. I mean, whatever, like that whole ethos, I guess. And so I got introduced to that I guess an appreciation for the history of Christianity through him, but not past.
I was going to say, what did you do to just stop like at 1500 or something?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
He kind of talked about Augustine, but not really. And and honestly, like, bless their heart, I just think even some of like the bigger name guys, like there's guys like John Piper and all, they're in kind of these weird sort of Presbyterian. I've lost track of all of it, but they're like, some of them are into the Puritans. It's just this weird, like the Doug Wilson churches. Yes. Like they're traditional Protestant, but it's a little shocking how little they know. Not everyone, but how little a lot of these pastors know about the history of the church outside of their like niche telling of how it all went down. But anyway, I got a taste of what it's like to look into the history of the church, and I liked it. It didn't occur to me to look further back because Pastor Mark didn't, so why would I?
Right.
So anyway, during that time, I started struggling with some deeper questions about the existence of God.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe it's because I lived in Seattle, and it's like really depressing to live in Seattle.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's what it is, or just being around very nihilistic people.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. Like some of the best people I know are from Seattle, but if you've lived in Seattle, or especially if you were a tattooer or hung out, I mean, look at like the 90s in Seattle. Look what kind of music came out of there.
Yeah.
I just got done listening to Sing Backwards and Weep, the Mark Lanigan.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Lanigan, listening to Streaming Trees. I just got done listening because I have to drive from here home a lot to see my family, and I come back and forth from Montana to Washington probably every 7 to 10 days. So I would listen to that, and it's about his experience in Seattle. And it just, even though that was like before my time, it really, I can smell Seattle when he's doing his memoir. You can it's just, there's something about it. And so I don't know if it was that or just me. These were all questions that I know you probably had, and everyone has if you're mildly intelligent and have an inkling of. I blame it on my inherent pessimism as a person. I'm sort of a cynic and very pessimistic. I don't know if it's a generational thing either, because we're roughly around the same generation. And so like a Gen X, late millennial thing, I don't know. It's just, it was always on my mind. And so I started reading a little bit here and there. Some like, I don't want to say I don't want to misrepresent like I took a deep dive into some like existentialist binge and stared into the void or anything. Like I didn't do that, but I definitely stopped being afraid to read some of that stuff, because it's not that I was afraid. I was just like, I was unsure about whether or not I would be convinced that God didn't exist. And that's a scary thing to ponder if you're a Christian.
Yep.
It's even if you're not a Christian, like if you come to the conclusion. And I did actually. I'll skip forward. When I lived in Seattle, I remember sitting in my truck, and we'd stopped attending Mars Hill, I think because I'd moved to another shop, and it was just, the church is just getting weird as usual, like leadership issue. It was just odd. So we were like going to this other church, and I don't know, like my wife was kind of not feeling it, and I was smoking a lot of marijuana at the time too, I'll just say, but. I remember sitting in my truck right before I had to go in to do a tattoo, and I was like, there's a high likelihood that this is just nonsense. Like, this is just not true. Like, none of this really holds up. Like, I just had this feeling in the pit of my stomach that this is not true. What I've learned about God and Jesus and Christianity, I don't know the details as to why it's not true, but I just have this like sense that it's not true. And I just got this like weird, what they say, this like existential dread or whatever that is, it came over me, and I almost had like a panic attack. It was really weird. It was like my entire worldview, my entire understanding of reality was just like pulled out from under me. And I sat in my truck, and I was like, what do I do? This is not I can't go do the student's tattoo like this. And so I ended up taking about a week off of work. I know that sounds really lame, but it was like psychologically scarring to face that and to face it honestly and to look it dead in the eyes. To stare into the abyss, I guess, and to look it dead in the eyes. I didn't have an immediate turnaround and stare back at it and become ubermensch or whatever. Like I didn't do that, but at the time. But anyway, so when that wore off, I called myself a reluctant atheist. And so I didn't want to be, but I was like, this is just dumb. This is nonsense. I tried to watch these like evangelical apologetics. Yeah, I won't mention any names, but like it was just like Band-Aid on a bullet wound and you couldn't stop the bleeding. I was just like, I'm done with this. And so for a couple of years, I was in that state and I just put it out of my mind and stopped thinking about stuff like that. Focused on existing and just not thinking about deeper things and smoking a lot of marijuana and just being a typical Seattle tattooer, to be honest. And then I remember sitting on my couch one day, had a day off or something, and I remember seeing Pope John Paul II. I think he was sick at the time, or it was something like that. And I remember seeing the Pope. It might have been Benedict. I don't know. It was one of the popes, and I remember seeing him on TV. And I just had this weird thought, like, what are these guys doing? They're dressed up all weird. There's all this stuff, and I have these like weird memories of it as a kid in this vague shadow of it from when I used to go to a Catholic church as a kid. And so I thought, I don't know anything. All I know about Roman Catholicism is what Pastor Billy Bob at whatever church I was attending told me. And so I just started looking at stuff online. And I think I went to like Wikipedia or something goofy like that. And whoever was the Pope at the time, I'm pretty sure it was right around when no, it wasn't when John Paul. Benedict had to have been Pope. I think it was Benedict, yeah, because John Paul died like a long time ago, like in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was Benedict. And I saw on whatever the article was or the piece, I saw that you could trace by name from him, like you're jumping across rocks across the pond, like Frogger or something, all the way back to the centuries, all the way down to the time of Christ, to Peter. And that, for some reason, that was just like it just blew my mind. I don't know why. I was just really impressed by that. And so I got online and just started like trying to learn. There was something about it that was drawing me to it. It wasn't just the aesthetic was cool. And I know a little bit about Catholic art, or more specifically Baroque art. I oil painted for years. So I knew some of that stuff, but I hadn't made the connection until later with the theology and Christianity. But I started looking at more and more stuff. And then I encountered these people who were ministers, pastors, who became Roman Catholic. And that to me was just like a paradigm shift, because I had thought, oh, Roman Catholicism is dumb, and anyone who's not a complete idiot leaves and becomes an evangelical or a Presbyterian or whatever. Like you become a Protestant, because obviously this isn't true. Look at it.
Yes.
Well, I discovered that, hey, it's a two-way street, and a lot of really smart people from that camp migrate this way. And that's around the time I encountered Orthodoxy. I know what it was, but it was always just like these weird, I see all these like weird Greek people, old Greek people going to this like weird looking place. I didn't even care. It'd be like if I passed a mosque or like a Sikh temple. Yeah. It was literally the same way. Like I see a bunch of Sikhs and I'm like, they look like nice people. I don't care at all about what they believe. Right. No interest. And so that's where I was with Orthodoxy. I didn't really understand the connection to Christianity, to be honest. And so, isn't God funny how he does things? But so anyway, I got really interested in Catholicism and encountered. Of course, I read Scott Hahn's book. I think everybody the last 20, 30 years has read that book when they're on their way in. And I watched a few videos about, like, I think Francis Schaeffer. He was that like mouthy dude. You know who that is? Yep, Francis Schaeffer. I do. Like he's like that mouthy dude that like made all these like videos about Orthodoxy in the early 90s, and then became like this like raging liberal and like rejected it all years later or something. But I encountered his earlier videos where he became Orthodox, and I watched all of them and was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. But I was also investigating Roman Catholicism. And then that was around the time I stumbled on Father Robert Barron. Or no, it was before. It was around that time. He had just started posting videos on YouTube, I think.
Okay.
And he wasn't. People listening know him as Bishop Robert Barron. He's super popular now. Nobody knew who he was then. He was just some random priest posting videos, and they were very matter of fact. But he was talking about like Aquinas and the 5 way. Like he's a scholastic. Is that right? A scholastic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a scholastic. He's super into Aquinas and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I encountered like Cardinal John Henry Newman. He was talking about him, and that was just like I had another, not an epiphany, but this realization, like, oh, this is the real deal intellectually. Like this is why I didn't know the details, but I knew this right here is what I didn't get in the Protestant churches. No matter, even if I go to these Reformed churches, and Calvinism and tulip and all that stuff, whatever. It's not even close to what I encountered when I started digging into Roman Catholicism. I think it was just a whole package of it, the history and everything. And I was still sort of interested in Orthodoxy, but Roman Catholicism, because that's my roots as a kid. That's what I was familiar with. And so I kept being pulled that direction. Wasn't quite convinced God existed, but I was pulled that direction. And then I actually attended an Orthodox liturgy. There was, where I was living, there was a parish that had back during that big conversion wave with Father Peter Gilquist. I think they came in as a whole parish, and it still exists.
That's the one I was thinking of. Yes.
Yeah. Father Peter Gilquist.
Yes. Where a bunch of people all were doing that big conversion movement.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were sort of part of that. And so I went to the liturgy, and I was like kind of surprised by how normal everyone was afterward. I took a couple pamphlets and was like, wow, this is really cool. Looked at some of the iconography, but still wasn't like, wow, I was like, oh, this is cool, I guess, but I don't know. It wasn't this big thing at the time. It was, but it wasn't like you would expect. And so anyway, to summarize, I started meeting with a priest where I was living in Seattle area. And this is where I had my first bit of like, I met with him and I'm like, hey, I was raised Catholic and I think it was confirmed, but I want to become Catholic again. And I did this whole thing I'm talking about now. And I could tell he was just like, like didn't want to listen to me. I could tell. But I went on and said, hey, basically, how do I come back to the church? And I said, you just go to confession and have communion and you're Catholic again. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty sweet. And he's like, but I'm going to warn you, this parish, you're more than welcome here. But, I don't know if you really like it here because it's mostly immigrants and like it's cool and they're great, but they're not gonna accept you in the community. And I'm just like sitting there like, what? I came here to like, I'm coming off of like Father Robert Barron and all these like EWTN and like this version of Catholicism where it's like, oh, this is like this rich tradition. And my first encounter with the actual church is like this guy who just hates his assignment. Yeah. Just like, yeah. And then I went to a mass, and it was in English, but it was like, there was like Mexicans and white people in Guatemala, whatever, it was like a normal, and I think there was a bunch of Filipino people there and whatever, it was cool. But it like, when I was in there, I was like, this church looks kind of weird. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like the Cathedral in Notre Dame, like it just looks a little different. And like the altar was in the middle. It was just one of those churches. I didn't know enough to know about what was going on in the Catholic Church. And so at that point, I had come back to the church, but I didn't really get it yet. And then we had moved from Seattle area back to the Spokane area, and I connected with the Cathedral of Our Lady of Lourdes, which is the big Catholic, like the diocesan cathedral. Beautiful, beautiful church. And I'm still actually friends with the rector to this day. He's a great guy, great community. They're sort of inching their way back to traditional non-TLM Catholicism, like traditional Catholicism in the best possible sense. But and so I started going to a mass there, and it was a huge improvement. Did their RCIA program because the rector, Father Connell, was like, you should probably go to catechism. You're interested in it. It wouldn't hurt. So I went, and of course, I was the only one in there asking questions. Everybody else was just there because they had to do it to get married.
Getting married.
And so I was the nerd that was like, in the catechism, it says, blah, blah, blah. And everybody like rolled their eyes. Like, we want to go to the bar, or we want to go to dinner. And I'm like, the guy asking all the questions about, well, is contraception really like,
right?
All those questions that people interested in theology ask. And the guy, there was a transitional deacon. Obviously, I could tell he was homosexual, and he was just did not like me, was very sassy, and just wanted to get out of there. Didn't want to be there either.
Sassy.
So,
right. Okay.
It was a long line of like encountering this. Like, my point is that after doing that for about a year and making some friends and going to Catholic retreats, probably about a year and a half, I'd say, I came to this realization that like this church that I'm in is in a crisis, that I'm coming back to is in a crisis, obviously. And I love the faith. I love the saints. I love the theology. I love the people. But this is not the faith that I read about in these books. It's totally different.
Wow.
And I know that like they're changing things. I'm not coming down on Catholics. I love Catholics. I love our Catholics. Like I don't have a chip on my shoulder. Yeah, they're the best Catholic. I don't have a chip on my shoulder about Roman Catholicism at all. I wouldn't say I'm an ecumenist, but I'm not a rigorist about Roman Catholicism. That's above my pay grade.
Yes.
So it's just not something I worry about. I leave it up to God. I'm not a priest, so I don't have to talk about it. But so anyway, I remember thinking back, like, well, I wonder about this Orthodox thing. So I start reading more about that. The other thing too about Roman Catholicism is this sounds really kind of, I'd say not dumb, but it just sounds really shallow maybe or trivial, but I never felt, I'm going to sound like I'm like a self-help guy or like, looking for like affirmations, but I never felt like actually accepted as a Catholic.
Okay.
I felt like sometimes I would be this like anomaly, like people would come up to me at Mass, like, tell me your story. I'm like, what? What do you mean my story? I'm like, what? I had a guy come up to me and he was literally being a saint. He like offered, he's like, do you need a place to sleep? And I'm like, what? It was like a daily Mass. I'm like, no, I just came from my house. He's like, have you had enough to eat? Oh. I'm like, yeah. Like, I didn't get what was going on. And then I realized like, oh, this dude thinks I'm homeless. Like, he thinks I'm like a bum. And then I told my wife about it. She's like, well, you kind of look homeless. So I couldn't fault him for it. But it was always this like token. Yes. I just felt either that way, which whatever you get, you get tattooed. It comes with territory. Yes. That's just, you bought the ticket, take the ride. Like, people are going to ask you questions about tattoos. They're going to think you're a loser or whatever. Like, that's just part of it. That's a package deal. And you can't complain about it either. It's just what it is. And so there was that experience, or I just didn't feel there's something wasn't clicking on multiple levels. Okay. And so I ended up checking out the Greek Orthodox Church, and the liturgy was awesome. I recognized a lot of things from the Catholic Mass, like regardless of what people say online, the form, there's a lot of similarities there. Okay. And so I recognized what was going on. Some of the prayers are similar, roughly similar. The creed is not, but the creed is, but there's the and the Son, the filioque or whatever. But anyway, it was very similar. And so afterward, I went to their coffee hour and talked to the priest, and he's retired now, but he was really cool. He's like, hey, yeah, I'm glad you came. We had a lot of people convert from Roman Catholicism. He said, I'm going to tell you something though. We'd love to have you here, and I'll meet with you again. And he gave me a book. He gave me, I think, a Callisto Swear book. And he said, but man, there is this parish across town, and they're all evangelical. It was an Antiochian parish. He was like, if you want to come back here, I am not pushing you away. I'd love to have you. Right. But why don't you go meet with this priest at this parish? And so I went up there, and he was totally right. I was like, oh, okay. And I remember, and I don't know, shortly before that, I should back up, I encountered Deaths of the World, and I met this guy named Jason, who was a Catholic convert to, he's still around. I don't think he writes, but he lives in Canada. And he wrote for them, and I became friends with him online. And it all sort of coalesced around the same time. He had left Roman Catholicism for Orthodoxy. So he was sort of my point of reference. And, seeing Death of the World, it's not that I'm trying to word this carefully. It's not that I wanted, like I want a punk rock religion, it wasn't like that at all. Or like, oh, wow, he's into death metal too. So we can believe the same thing. it wasn't like that at all. But I did notice that what I experienced when I encountered like the monks and the aesthetic there, I went, okay, like I can't even really put it into words now, but it was like, I felt like, okay, there's a place for me. And being the Gen X elder millennial cynic, scoffing at anything like that, it's like, that sounds so dumb. But I mean, being, and like, I found that went, okay, there's something here that I can identify with or whatever. And so I went to the Antiochian parish, clicked, the priest was cool. He said, I started going to liturgy there and go to the choirs class. And he said, I was like, well, I kind of want to bring my wife. And he was like, no, don't bring your wife yet. And I was like,
right.
Don't bring my wife to church. What are you talking about? And he's like, why don't you bring her over to my house? We'll have dinner and then you bring her to church. And he was totally right. We went over there.
She's going to think this is weird at first. Yes.
Yeah. He basically. And so my wife met him and his wife. They were great. And, he has kids that were a little younger than me and my wife connected with that. And they're obviously like normal people. They weren't like weirdos who like, we keep our beds, the married beds separate.
Yes,
they weren't like weird Orthodox. No offense. Nobody get offended, but there's sort of weird, there's some stuff that like maybe people from the outside looking in might not want to become Orthodox if they see it.
Yes.
Not that it's wrong. It's just not for people where we were at. And
not that there's anything wrong with that. Yes, go ahead.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm not a priest, so I'm not here to condemn that.
Yes.
Anyway, so he was totally right. My wife met them. She's like, they're really cool. And so I took her to church and she was like, okay, these people are normal and this is weird, but like, I can get this. And my wife is like a nun. Okay. A nun, meaning she wasn't raised anything. And so when she became a Christian, she didn't have that baggage yet, really, for Orthodoxy. Yep. And so, we ended up just flying into the church rather quickly because I'd already kind of wrestled through a lot of stuff. It was just like when I started digging into the book I think we used was The Faith by Carlton, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was the book that we went out of. And
there you are, people. Someone's going to go, what book did he say?
Yes.
I'm holding it up right here. And
it got reprinted.
It did. This is a reprint that Clark just put out.
That's good. It's maybe because I'm an old head now or whatever, but it's one of the best books, I think, if you're an evangelical coming into the church.
Maybe that's why it's
one
spoke
of the best
to me.
Books.
I thought it's the best one I've read as far as simplicity and effective, explaining, basically.
Well, it doesn't have the, it doesn't, honestly, like the one thing I liked about it was I felt like it didn't have a lot of the goofy marketing.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't as common then. This was a long time ago, I guess. But now there seems to be this push in the Orthodox world to mimic a lot of the goofy evangelical marketing. I just think that's a huge mistake.
A huge mistake.
That's a whole other conversation. But I didn't get that from. It was old conciliar press stuff, so there's the roots of that, but it wasn't the same way. But anyway, we went through that book, and it just dotted some I's and crossed some T's and redirected me. And we literally flew into the church.
All right. I hope you guys enjoy that. And don't forget, next week, part 2 of this discussion with Shayne Swenson will be premiering next Tuesday. We get even much deeper into iconography itself next week. And I should tell you, the 18th of July, this week, as this episode drops, we are doing our special Zoom meeting for my Patreon supporters. Our special guest is Jamie Hanshaw, wife of Jay Dyer. Sometimes people call her Jamie Dyer. It's Jamie Hanshaw. She's going to be our guest. If you're not a member of this club and you'd like to join in this private Zoom discussion that will not be recorded or posted anywhere, again, it's this Thursday, the 18th of July at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Go to patreon.com/counterflow. Do $5 or more per month. And you, my friends, are in. We are going to get into, I know many of you are very familiar with her work. We are going to get into a discussion that's right in her wheelhouse. And of course, anyone in the Zoom can ask any questions at any time on pop culture, Hollywood, the music industry, and the occult symbolism, demonic, satanic, all of these things in our pop culture and entertainment. and certain things are put there on purpose, some by accident. We're going to get into all of that from an Orthodox perspective, of course, with the great Jamie Hanshaw, aka Jamie Dyer. Again, that's this Thursday, the 18th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And until next week, when I bring you part 2 of the episode with Shayne Swenson, you guys have a great one. See ya.
You get split in half, the icon, the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.